Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.
Radio City Talk.
Welcome to another edition of Mental Health Monday from Radio City Talk. My name is Mick Coyle. I do hope you're well. We've got a really great show today, a really interesting guest on the programme as well, who's going to be talking about their story, their mental health journey as well. We talk about mental health on the radio. We're really proud of the fact we talk about mental health on the radio, and we do it every Monday here on Radio City Talk. The show is also podcast as well, which means you can download it and listen to it at a later date. You can listen to every single previous episode of Mental Health Monday, and we're also live streaming as well, or we will have a live stream of the conversation as well via our Radio City Talk YouTube channel as well. Now, some people are on the YouTube channel. Not everybody's that comfortable with being on video as well. Of course, people are sharing their stories in an open and honest way, absolutely, but not everyone's that confident to appear on video as well as live radio and podcast. So not every single episode is available on YouTube, but there's a good array and a good selection as well. Let's meet our guest this week. His name is Liam Kelly. He's from Make Liverpool, and he's also chair of the Baltic Triangle, famous in Liverpool now. Liam, great to see you. Thank you for your time today. Thanks for joining us on the programme.
No worries.
I see you've got a really interesting story. I think people are going to be inspired by what they hear from you, but I think a lot of the things that you will say will resonate with certain people, particularly maybe people who work in different sectors. Can we start by talking about Frisbees, though?
Yeah, sure. It's unavoidable.
Yeah, so you had presumably you played Frisbee as a kid.
Yeah, I actually picked it up in sixth form college. There was a teacher there who had learnt to play at university. So a very lucky situation to have learnt to play then.
So how do you learn to play Frisbee? Because I think people will think, Frisbee's just pick it up and throw it to your mate in the park.
Yeah, in the same way that kicking a football is kicking a football. But there is a competitive side to the game. So I play a sport called Ultimate Frisbee, or just Ultimate, because Frisbee is a brand name. And it's a 7-a-side game. It's a team sport invasion game, a bit like American football, but without contact. You can't move when you have the Frisbee. It's like netball in that sense. And yeah, really growing, pretty big at universities.
And it turns out that you were really good at it.
I would say I was lucky to learn young.
You're going to talk it down, but actually you were representing, was it Team GB you were essentially part of?
Yeah, I was drafted into the Great Britain under-20s programme, then under-23s, and then the national team, the senior team.
Wow. That's quite something from throwing a piece of plastic around, but then, you could just say the same about kicking around a bag of wind. Where was that taking you, that journey?
That took me all over the world. It really was my life ambition to both play and work in that industry. And I did that, and I achieved that goal, and it was pretty amazing. The culmination, it took me to Japan, to the World Championships. Some would say that our team overachieved, and I guess I would agree with them, but I came home with a silver medal, and life ambition met really at the sort of tender age of 23, 24. Amazing.
What sort of venues were you playing Ultimate in then?
So sometimes it was in stadiums, but not like football stadiums, of course. The big competitions would draw some crowds. They draw quite large crowds now. The game is involved in the World Games, which is the precursor to the Olympics. And, in the World Games, we sometimes get tens of thousands of people just because we're one of many sports that's played.
So huge success at a young age. At the same time, were you developing business ideas in terms of what you wanted to do maybe once you'd stop playing Ultimate, or if you didn't get selected for the team?
Yeah, I think that people would have described me as entrepreneurial, and I was given the opportunity to start a little business. My parents sort of lent me a little bit of money, just like 500 quid to get some business cards together. But it's a pretty privileged situation to be in. Me and a friend started to coach Frisbee in schools, and we made that into a business. Eventually that led to us being asked to do that nationally with the governing body, and eventually that for me led to a job with the national governing body of the sport.
Excellent stuff. Did it feel like in your 20s, early 20s, mid 20s, other time where obviously physically you kind of you're obviously developed into a fully formed human being as well. Emotionally though, you can be kind of all over the place still at that point as well. Did you feel when you were up and running, the business was up and running, you obviously achieved the life goal as well, the travelling out to Japan, that things were good, things were going well?
I think all young men suffer with this idea of being invincible, and for me, as the story explains, that does come crashing down, and at a very high height, representing Great Britain, winning silver medal, being in the perfect job, and all these life ambitions ticked, and the sort of that sense of invincibility was definitely there.
At what point did you notice a chink within your own armour, if you like?
So for me, and I think for many people, it was the straw that broke the camel's back, really. I'd returned home from this amazing experience. I also got a chance to travel around Japan with my friend Marcus, who spoke Japanese, which meant we could go to sort of places that other people wouldn't have been to. So incredible experience. Back down to the reality of, being at home, having been away for a while. I lived at home and I worked in the room next to my bedroom, and I had a lot of work to do when I got back. And I'd always struggled to be focused. I'm quite a chaotic person. That's definitely changed in recent years, but still difficult to get on top of the things that need to be done, like many people. And that was where, for me, sort of my world started to fall apart, I suppose.
And in terms of that, was it about your sort of emotional response to returning home that you'd had these sort of like this high moment, if you like, this thing where you'd seen these incredible things, you'd had the trip around Japan as well as the sporting success as well, and then returning home to the job, if you like, which involves, working in the room next to which you sleep? Did you get the sense that life was very different to what you'd been experiencing? Yeah,
I think sometimes it's most commonly described in an understandable way with musicians, when they're on the big stage and their life ambitions and their life goals are there. And then they come off tour and they feel blue. I have friends who are musicians who have felt exactly the same way, just a different context. And for me, it was reality. There were also a couple of things that happened that aren't in the blog. A friend of mine passed away, and it was unexpected, and as did a friend of mine's mother, who was my next door neighbour. She passed away, all in very sort of close proximity, and that really was sort of a compounded small thing here, small thing there. And I, as I say, was in a bad place with a lot of things. Really, actually, I was in a fine place, but I'd come down from such a height to sort of the normal. That drop in altitude, I suppose, was the thing that really triggered me to end up with the period of poor mental health. Yeah.
In terms of that, and if you're okay, kind of like sharing
Absolutely.
that, you talk about the straw that broke the camel's back. Often when you experience a thing at a relatively young age still, you're not massively aware of the fact that this is a mental health crisis that you're going through. It feels like this is the situation I found myself in because this is what maybe life is like for adults. Was there a moment of self-awareness that something was going wrong, if you like, from a mental health point of view, that actually maybe you shouldn't feel like this, or that things were getting on top of you too much?
I would actually say no. It came out of nowhere, which is what made it difficult. In hindsight, now understanding mental health and understanding my own personality, I realised that actually all of these things were there. They were just under the surface, and there was always a sense of like, I just need to beat this illness or whatever, and it was never about that. Actually, in reality, it was about coming to terms with who I was as a person and what kind of personality I had, not feeling guilty about that and what have you. It was a return home that broke the camel's back, that led me to some classic symptoms of poor mental health. And for me, that was anxiety and agoraphobia. So somebody who'd been running around Japan for the past few months to suddenly be, bed stricken and really unable to leave my house was difficult. And it came out of nowhere. It came out home from a night out. I obviously had a few drinks and all that sort of stuff. Woke up in the morning. Sometimes you wake up with the beer fear, but that anxiety didn't go away, and it got worse and worse and worse. And my world really quickly sort of collapsed in on me.
Was part of the issue the fact you talk about the idea that you were working in the room next to it, that actually there wasn't another life away from that small environment that you're in, that there was a sense that was your existence, and that idea that if you'd have woken up and thought, I'm going to work now, I'm getting on a bus, I'm heading into town, whatever it would have been, that it might have been different. Did it feel within your own head as if your world had gone from this huge global travelling, superstar sport thing to me and my bedroom and the desk in the room next door? Yeah.
And you know what? If it hadn't have been that, it would have been something else, because my personality, like many people's personalities, has challenging elements to it, and obsession with the extreme is one of them. Hence why I'd gone to the lengths of dedicating my life to playing another sport. It was like having a second job. And when all that was away and I just had the one job, I suppose there was a void to be filled. And I was lucky enough to find the perfect support in the people that I had. And those circumstances were incredible, and I'm extremely lucky and thankful for them. And my counsellor explained to me really about how I had filled the void with an opportunity to torture myself rather than putting that energy and those thoughts to good use. At that time, I was not skilled at all in how to use that energy and control those thoughts and emotions as I am now. And that's, those lack of skills, I suppose, were the things that tipped me over the edge.
We've got Liam Kelly with us on Mental Health Monday on Radio City Talk, sharing his mental health journey. People want to join in the conversation at Radio City Talk on Twitter, and we're up and about on the email as well. The email address never changes, simply mick@radiocity.co.uk. How did the anxiety manifest itself?
So I suppose a classic way, high emotion, feeling like it's in the top of my chest, and sort of the visual, the world literally feeling smaller and smaller and smaller. I had a little taster of that coming up in the lift in Radio City today. I'm not the fondest of heights. I think, had that have been a few years ago, that probably would have tipped me over the edge, and I would have had to have sat down and all those things. Now I'm able to sort of recognise when that anxiety comes and sort of get on top of the emotion and be accepting of it. There's a really, really nice analogy that HeadSpace, the app, uses about sitting next to the river and your feet they're in the water, and when life gets emotional, the river starts to swell and the water starts to cover your feet, and that feeling of your feet being covered in that example is like when the emotion and rises in your chest and your vision starts to narrow. Are you going to jump in the river and swim around and thrash around and all of the negative things that go along with that, being soaking wet and being cold? Or are you just going to allow yourself to either move away from the bank or allow for the river to become calm again? And, the mindfulness approach that helped me is very much about those skills that will allow you to let the river calm back down, or if you need to, move away from the river.
I'm really keen to sort of find out some more about sort of the different avenues that you sort of went down to get help. You mentioned HeadSpace, which is a great app, and I know you had a conversation with the GP and counselling services as well. How long do you think were you in your mind where you were thinking there's something wrong here, or I have these feelings of anxiety? Was it something you were able to sort of reach out on straight away? Did you let it sort of get on top of you for a protracted period of time? Was there a moment where you were living with these issues and weren't seeking help, weren't looking for that hand to guide you away from the riverbank?
As I said, I was living with my parents, which was, I suppose, lucky at the time. And at first, I let it get on top of me, and then it subsided a little bit. And then I got on with life, and only a week later, it came back, but it came back with a vengeance. And that's where the agoraphobia began and the real, the crippling anxiety. There's a difference between just feeling anxious about situations and nervous as a spectrum all the way up to something that's crippling and debilitating. And it got to that point. And that was difficult. And I suffered with it, not in silence, but certainly in the hopes that it would subside with no real path. If you think about it, that's utter nonsense. That's like breaking your ankle and just being like, well, if I just stop using it for a few weeks, maybe it will set itself. I mean, when you say it in that context, it is utterly ridiculous. Which is why seeking help was the right thing to do. And in hindsight, should have done it sooner. But it took time, and I went to the GP, and my GP was not fit for helping, but was a good GP, so knew that she didn't have the skills to deal with it, and gave me a few options that I could have to, pursue. You know what? Even getting to the GP was difficult. That was the first time in a few weeks that I had actually been outside, and then to sit in the waiting room, and then go and have a conversation with somebody about this. That alone was unbelievably difficult, and there must be people out there who can't even get to that point yet and really need something or somebody to go to them or help them go on that journey.
Absolutely. We'll continue the conversation in a few moments' time here on Mental Health Monday. We've got Liam Kelly sharing his story here in the home of Rock Sport and Talk, the home of Mental Health Monday. It's Radio City Talk.
Mental Health Monday on Radio City Talk with Mick Coyle.
Radio City Talk.
My name's Mick. We've got Liam in the studio for Mental Health Monday this week at Radio City Talk. If you want to get involved on social media in the programme. Also, if you want to get involved, you can email me as well, mick@radiocity.co.uk. Thank you to everybody who was sending questions through. There was a Mental Health Monday last week, but I was a pre-recorded show for last week. That podcast is still available, and but if you've emailed over the course of the last week, I was away and I've got thousands of emails on a whole host of different work-related things. So if there's a mental health story you want to share or you've emailed the program, just resend it and that'll appear at the top of my pile. I'm more likely to sort of get to it. But if you have gone through the trouble of sending me an email, I will do my best to reply to as many as we can. Liam's sharing his story, which starts out with Ultimate in Japan. The story began well before then. I'm sure you know your childhood and everything in between. But we're talking about Liam's work-life balance that came after that one as well. And we'll talk, Liam, if you're okay with what you're doing now. Because I think it's an exciting sort of thing, and I wonder how you're sort of channeling your energy in that regard as well. Can we talk about the avenues that which you went to seek help? You touched on your doctor before. They weren't ideally suited for what you were looking for, but they were able to signpost and point you in the right direction as well. At what point did you find yourself in an environment where you thought, oh, this is going to help? This is going to be the thing which puts me on a better path? Because I think there'll be a lot of people listening to this who are waiting to find that, who are thinking, well, I'm trying this, or I've looked at this, but I'm not on the thing that I feel is going to take me somewhere.
I always encourage people to ask for help, first of all. And if I hadn't asked for help, it would have been much worse for me. And I'm sure much worse for other people as well. And that's not just in the context of mental health, that's in the context of work, that's in the context of sport, that's in the context of everything. The people who ask for help are the ones that generally will find it. And when you ask somebody for help, they will usually feel very sort of privileged and chuffed that you ask them for help. It's a bit of a shrewd thing to do in business as well, is ask somebody who you need something from for help. And that's what I did. I went and I asked my friend who I knew was studying to be a psychologist, counsellor, and she recommended somebody for me to speak to. And I've gone down the route of, phoning the NHS services and all those sorts of things. And they're much better now than they were, but they've still got a long way to go. And that's a whole different conversation, I suppose. But I wasn't able to access the immediate care that the NHS offered. So I wasn't willing to admit over the phone that I felt suicidal. And that really, for them, was the line that you had to be crossing in order to get help from the NHS, which is ridiculous. And so I went private, and I didn't mean like private health. I went to a counsellor and found a very great counsellor who didn't charge very much for people who couldn't, he charged based on your means. I suppose now I realise he was actually just a staunch socialist. And yeah, he gave me the opportunity to spend an hour with him for free, which I did. He told me what he thought I needed and what that course of action would look like and how much it would cost. And I paid for his services, and I still see him from time to time, maybe once a year at this point. But, in the past it had been once every few months, but at the time it was, once, twice a week. And there was a course of action that I had to take to sort of get myself to a point where I was feeling well. That idea of kind of checking in with an individual, trained individual as well, but that being over weeks, then months, and then, from a year. Do you allow yourself now, or have you found a way yourself of almost checking in with yourself in regards to your own mental health, that you can have that conversation within your own head that allows you to sort of make up your mind about, do you need to speak to somebody else? Yeah, and mindfulness is the tool in which you can use to check in with yourself. It talks a lot about being in the present, and it talks a lot about the skills that you would need. The thing I really liked about the HeadSpace app and the sort of the mindfulness movement in general was the stripping away of the spirituality element to it. I'm not a religious person. That sort of stuff never really appealed to me. But there's a practical side to meditating. And I remember talking to a girlfriend, a former girlfriend, who also struggled from mental health challenges, and she couldn't fathom the idea of sitting still for a period of time and allowing the thoughts that were torturing her to to manifest. And that was a fundamental misunderstanding of what meditation was. It isn't allowing thoughts to just run wild in your mind. It's about allowing them to be, and then not having emotion attached to them. Be that guilt or horror or shame. We all have thoughts that are horrendous. We've all, wanted to punch a coworker, or some screaming kids that you just wanted to throw out the plane or whatever. These are dark thoughts in your mind that, if go unchecked, can manifest in a different way and torture you. But equally, you can find a way to let them be and not feel guilty by them, knowing that everybody else feels the same. It's just how it's contextualized. Mindfulness helps you deal with that.
For people who haven't tried that before, how quickly would you say you become not an expert in it, but attuned to the sort of making it work for you?
So I used it as treatment, and I used it every day. And that started off with 10 minutes. That was the free version of the app. Once I sort of realized that I sound like I'm being paid by HeadSpace now. Once I realized that worked for me, I paid for the app. It wasn't very much money. And then I used that up to getting to an hour of meditation, and then sort of like a bell curve, I eased off, and I definitely don't do it daily now. I do it more based on need, and if I feel like my focus is slipping, I'll treat myself to doing some meditation. It's a little bit like the way people treat themselves to getting in the bath, or eating some chocolate or whatever it is, that self-medication for feeling better and feeling indulged, I suppose. Headspace can be a part, or mindfulness can be a part of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, on this program, we've had people come on and say knitting is their mindfulness space.
It's that but that's meditative,
pounding the pavements, going out jogging as well, painting, poetry, all kinds of different things as well. So great, Liam, that you found sort of your thing. Headspace is a great app. We are open for sponsorship, by the way. People wanted to do that. Can I ask you about the idea that the counsellor, the psychologist, talked to you about, you'd been looking to fill a gap. There was a sort of slightly chaotic nature to the things that you've been doing. As you've got older, has that changed at all? Do you still have a certain mindset that you have to kind of fulfill, if you like? Or is that something which you've sort of grown out of, or that has changed as life has moved on, your responsibilities change?
I would say I was probably busier than ever. Was that a good thing? Am I really just hiding some of the underlying issues? It's possible. I think if I end up in a negative situation again, at least I'll be equipped to deal with it this time. I'll know to ask somebody, who to ask, where to find help, all those sorts of things. But part of the remedy for this improvement in my health was to channel that energy in a different way, and that's why we started Make Liverpool. So our social enterprise was at first just a remedy for me and my friends. A Facebook status that said, does anybody else want to share a co-working space? It wasn't called co-working at the time. Shared studio, and that being open meant that people would respond, and people came back to me. Good close friends, co-founder of Make, Kirsten, came back, and she'd experienced not too dissimilar sort of feelings. Had come back from London as an artist with a master's to working in a casino, the sort of the millennial dream, I suppose. And we decided that we would start a space together. And the more we talked about it, particularly the more I talked about mental health, promised myself I would be open about it, the more people wanted to share in that remedy and that experience that we create for ourselves. That's where it started for us. And we took a larger space, and that meant that we were able to accommodate people, and that studio turned into, from 4 in the basement of Elevator underneath what is now the Baltic Social. Although it was good being under a pub, we ended up upstairs on the second floor accommodating 35 individuals.
The fact that you went from that bedroom desk in the room next door to physically seeking out a creative hub, if you like, seeking out the co-workers, and finding that as a different pathway in life. Is that just by pure chance, or do you think that's a direct reflection of the thing you experienced early on with the small world, small rooms next to each other, to physically changing that, to physically stepping out and saying to people, who wants to be part of what I am? Because those two people are very different people, aren't they?
Absolutely.
In terms of that space that they were looking for.
Yeah, and I chair the area company now in the Baltic Triangle, and that's very much about a place and an identity and a community, and that couldn't be further from the agoraphobic person that I was. But I would say that was the person who I wasn't, and the person who I am now was the person that you would have expected. Sort of a quick jump back. I remember being in the car with one of my close friends, Simon, who's a teacher, and you know, he's sort of just turning to me as I'm there bawling my eyes out, like just completely lost in almost everything, and saying to him, you know, I just feel lost. Pretty much the only words that I could get out to him. Simon's not the most emotionally astute person, and he was really struggling with it, despite the fact that I was reaching out for help. And he just said to me, you know, shaking his head, you are somebody who I never thought would be lost. And I think that's a really important message for me to share, is that even the people who are the loudest and the most outgoing, and the people who look the least lost, can equally be suffering or sufferers. And it was, in hindsight, thinking about his reaction to me, I know that now that it was the anxiety and the agoraphobia that was not me, and that they were just the situation manifesting.
So it's so important that, and actually, it's a perfectly natural reaction that your friend had there, because, you know, for all the while we talk about your mental health, but actually, if you think, well, actually, I'm in a good place, I don't need to do that, you've got to be prepared for the fact that actually your best mate, husband, wife, partner, sister, brother, mother, dad, whoever it might be the one who turns to you, and you almost have to be able to be prepared yourself for what might come in that particular conversation, because people will be surprised all the time, and they'll say that thing of, oh, I never thought that you would have felt like that. And as soon as you get into the details of how you have felt, suddenly those connections are created. And it might well be that individual as well might have had similar experience themselves, and actually creating that shared moment might be part of that journey that takes you forward.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we all know a co-worker who's never off sick. And then when they're off sick, you're like, oh God, you're never off sick. Well, it's sort of the same thing. You know, we're talking about health. We're not talking about something that's abstract. And mental health in that context can be felt like that. You know, oh, you've never looked down before. Well, there can be a first time. Somebody can feel, you know, disconnected or whatever it is that they feel for the first time. And you're right. I think we all have a shared responsibility for improving our well-being and our health, of which mental health is a part. And that shared responsibility is being willing to talk about it, A, and B, sort of, you know, knowing some basic things about signposting and helping people, in the same way that, you know, we are desperate for everybody in society to be able to do CPR. We should also be desperate for everybody in society to be able to signpost people to very simple, you know, pieces of advice for when we're feeling, you know, depressed or anxious or what have you.
Absolutely. Mental health first aid, which is fast becoming a really big talking about point. Do you, anyone who knows the Baltic Triangle, the Baltic area, Make Liverpool and the brands, they'll know there's it's not a corporate thing necessarily. There's corporate element to it as well, but there's a different kind of sense, a different vibe to the way you do business. Do you try and include sort of, not mindfulness as a thing, you're not, you know, insisting on doing meditation before every meeting, but do you try and include mindfulness to the way you do business now, to the way you make decisions, the people you kind of work with, bearing in mind how people might think, the way that people might think within certain environments? Is that something from a business point of view that you actually take on now? Yeah,
I think, answer your question about the corporate, I think that they are starting to realise that if you invest in people's well-being, you get the best out of people. And, you know, business will look at humans as assets, and if they can get the most out of their assets by their assets being well-oiled and happy and all of those things, then that's good for business. For us, we run a social enterprise, so we are socially minded. We want social return, and we look for social value. We care deeply about what our staff and our tenants and our residents and our members feel and think. Sometimes we don't do a great job at that, and we check ourselves against it, but I think at least we know that we're doing that. And by that I mean there's always more to be done, and there's so many things involved in creating an environment where mental health and well-being is top. But the idea of sharing resources and assets, which is what Make Liverpool does, and convincing people to not work at home anymore. You know, you might have a good little business or hobby that you want to turn, but if you take a studio and you're part of a community, it's better for your business. You get to trade with each other, the support, and it's just so much nicer being around other human beings.
Can I ask you about that? Because there'll be plenty of people who have jobs where they work from home, where they sit in front of a computer, or either it's art or music or whatever it would be. They've got a studio space at home. They might be thinking, actually, this is I get up in the morning, I eat when I want, I work how I want, and so on and so forth. But actually, you're saying that, having experienced that yourself, that you're finding value elsewhere. And there might also be the more kind of like cynical values to it as well, of that it makes business sense as well. People taking that leap from thinking, oh, I've got it made now, I can even work from home. For a lot of people, that's the dream, that's the aspiration. To change people's mindset again is a big step, I guess, for a lot of people to take. But for some people, it might be a very helpful step to take.
I wouldn't say that working from home was the dream. I would suggest that that's people's misunderstanding. I want to work from home, it's the dream. The option to work from home is the dream. The option to work from an office is the dream. The option to have options is what the dream is. And if you can have a job where you get what is needed for that circumstance, then that would be perfection.
It's a great point, that actually, because a lot of people will think, I'm working from home, I should feel, this should be the dream. This should be perfect. Why does it not feel great when I've got this thing that so many people would kill for? And actually, because it might not be the option for you.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? As the first real job that I had, the only other job that I'd had before that was working in a cinema, which was a dream, by the way, was that I was working from home and I was young. And you know what? Young people need mentorship. And I now have unbelievable mentors who surround me. And I'm lucky enough to have found people like Erica Rushton, who is chair of Baltic Creative, and I wouldn't have found those people if I'd have remained a home worker. Yeah, it's important to have the options. That's the dream, I think.
Excellent stuff. In terms of business at the moment, what are you working on from a social enterprise point of view?
Well, we've just won investment actually from First Arc. So We've been looking for support. When we had initial seed investment from Beautiful Ideas Company, and that allowed us to open a second site, which was great. We did that in the North Docks, which is now known as the 10 Streets, and we opened a hub there. And we now have 75 or so tenants across 2 sites. We're opening a third site in conjunction with Wirral Council. Am I allowed to say that? It's too late now. And
that slipped out.
Yeah,
slipped out.
Yeah. So we've got a good deal with them to sort of reactivate parts of Birkenhead that need it, and and that's in the pipeline. That will hopefully be delivered on this year. And we won investment to improve the building in the North Docks, take more tenants. I mean, that's the dream. Have 80, 90 people who are in those situations, and hopefully hearing the messages that we're putting out there and want to identify and be a part of those things. We're going to open a little event space in there, and and hopefully things will grow from there. And the really key thing about that, the really cool thing about it, was that we found an investor in First Arc, who are a housing association, who was willing to lend to a social enterprise who are revenue first. We make money, but it's what we do with the money that is the thing that makes us a social business, which makes you not lendable by traditional lenders. So yeah, props to First Arc for lending us.
They've had
money.
Their plugs there, yeah. Absolutely. Can I actually give a go full 360? Yeah. Do you still play on the old frisbee?
I played a couple of weekends ago with the local team that I founded and used to captain. They're in the division below the one that I would normally be playing in, but all my friends are there, and I had a wonderful time. I'm definitely a has-been. Not as quick or as strong as I used to be.
Thank you for sharing your story today, Liam. Thank you for being so open and honest as well. Good luck with all the business ventures as well, but also good luck with yourself as well and your own journey. We really appreciate you sharing your story, and thanks for joining us on Mental Health Monday.
Thanks.
Liam's story available to download as a podcast for this week. If you've already downloaded it, thank you. If you would like to like and subscribe to the podcast, you can do. You can even rate us 4-star. I think that was at least a 4-star. At least a 4-star. I think it was certainly a 5-star performance from Liam as well. But if people want to like, subscribe, and rate the podcast as well, be really keen to hear from you. Liam, thank you for your time. Absolute pleasure to get you on the programme. Best of luck with everything, and we'll speak to you again very soon, I'm sure.
Thank you very much.
It's Radio City Talk, and it's Mental Health Monday.
Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle
on Radio City Talk.